All right, good evening, everybody. Thanks for joining me. We'll go ahead and get started here. If you got your questions, go ahead and post them. Should be below the video if you're on a smaller screen. To the right of the video on a larger screen. All right, so it looks like we had some questions. So that was on the 17th. Trying to think of when we had office hours last. Do we have office hours on Friday? I don't think we did. Yeah, it was just Thursday. All right, so we'll actually, some of these videos came in after. So Bill H says, how would I raise my ball speed? So there's basically two ways to raise your ball speed, and then you can break those down into categories. So the first way is to raise your club head speed, right? So all things equal, if you raise your club head speed, your ball speed will go along with it. So to raise your club head speed, there's all kinds of things that you can do, right? You can, the first thing I'd recommend is just working through our 20-minute distance fix that basically breaks everything down, all the major things that you can do to raise your club head speed. So, basically getting a bigger turn, using the ground better, pushing into the ground, getting a good weight shift, that sort of thing. Releasing the club properly, the sequencing in which you're doing things, all those kinds of things. So that would be in the 20-minute distance fix. The other way that you can raise your ball speed, and I should say that this isn't always something that you can do, because if you're already doing this, it can't really get much better, but you can improve how solid you're hitting the golf ball, right? So if you're already hitting the ball really solid, there's not going to be much you can do to raise your ball speed. So like a tour player, for example, if a tour player who's already hitting the ball extremely solid, right, if they want to raise their ball speed, they're going to need to raise their club head speed in order for that to happen, right? But recreational golfers, a lot of times will have this option. So you can increase the amount that you hit it in the center of the club face. You can improve your face and path relationship. So if you're cutting across the golf ball, right, you're going to be losing ball speed. The main thing is hitting it in the center of the face. That's really the main thing that you can do to raise your ball speed. But if you're doing that and you're cutting across the ball, that's another thing that you can do. If you're hitting down on it with a lot of loft, right, that can also lower your ball speed. So basically hitting up on the ball and almost hitting it almost like you feel like you're hitting a top spin forehand. That could be something that raises your ball speed. So those would be the things that you can do. The main thing is raising your club head speed. And then beyond that, it would be improving the contact that you make with the golf ball. But again, that's not really an option for some people. All right, so Jeff Cooper says, good morning. I think this was Friday morning. He posted this. Fairway bunkers, do I flit or, I think he means flip, or still keep my shaft lean? Thanks. You want to keep your shaft lean. So when you hit it out of a fairway bunker, you're really doing the same thing that you would hit out of a normal fairway for the most part. The only real difference is that you make some adjustments based on the lie being a little bit more difficult to hit out of, right? So out of a fairway, you have a little bit more margin for error. You can hit slightly behind the golf ball. You have more stability, right? Typically on grass, on normal ground, on normal turf, you're going to have more stability. So you can take a bigger swing. You can be more aggressive, that sort of thing. I have a fairway bunker. It's very difficult to be very aggressive with your swing because the ground just isn't really stable. So a lot of times you don't really want to take like a full all-out swing. It just makes it more difficult to do so. I would recommend, taking a shorter swing, being a little bit more smooth and deliberate with your swing, maybe taking some extra club, putting the ball, maybe one ball back in the stance to encourage more ball first contact, because when you're hitting out of a fairway bunker, you must make ball first contact. Otherwise, it's going to be a bad result. Because typically when you're hitting out of a fairway bunker, part of the ball is actually going to be under the sand a little bit. So if you hit behind the ball at all, it's just going to be a chunk, right? So we don't really want to hit much behind the ball at all. Whereas out of a fairway, the ball is actually sitting on top of the grass, so it's actually typically going to be above the ground a little bit. So there's a little bit of cushion, going on there. So you can actually hit slightly behind the golf ball, but have a fairway bunker, you can't. So what I like to do, have a fairway bunker. I like to take an extra club, take a little bit shorter of a swing, and be very deliberate with my swing. And I put the ball about a ball back in my stance. I lean forward. I get my weight forward and take more of a 3/4 swing with an extra club. And typically it works better doing that because it helps, to make better contact. So Eric H says, you talk a lot about turning through the swing. I think that I use my arms too much. Could you go through this for clarification? Well, we need to be using both, right? If you think about if I'm all arms in the golf swing, if the golf swing is just arms, it's just this, right? This is all the arms do, right? So my arm's going up like this, and then it goes down, and then it goes up like that. Like that's, so if you look at it from this angle, my arms do this in the golf swing. They go, this is the back swing, down swing, follow through. That's what it is. So then when we add the turn to that, it looks like this, right? So we need to be doing both in the golf swing. Now, there are some people that don't turn their body very much, and then it's just this, right? And then they come through, right? So you're robbing yourself of power when you do that. We really want to get the hips turning. We want to get the shoulders turning, right? Because that's going to allow you to get the most power out of your swing. So yeah, very, very important. So one thing that we talk about in the Tuscany Golf System, the power turn course, is making sure that we have a good power turn. So we want to make sure that we're able to get enough power. Just like if we don't use our arms in the golf swing, then the swing is just this, right? If I don't use my arms, then this is my swing, right? I need to raise my arms, right, to be able to do that. So yeah, we need to use both. You have to turn your body. The way I think about it is that your body turns. Those are the horizontal components of the swing, right? So you think of that as like merry-go-round rotation. That's what that is, right? So my hips are turning on a horizontal, and my shoulders are turning. Now they're technically on a tilt, right? But these are basically the horizontal rotational components, and then the lifting, the vertical rotation components. That's all arms and wrists, basically, right? So that would be kind of like our Ferris wheel kind of rotation in the swing. So that's this, right? So those are the things we want. We want both to maximize, and really from a functional standpoint, to hit good golf shots. If I only turn my body and I don't lift my arms, I'm going to tend to swing way too much from the inside and not hit very good shots. So I'm going to tend to hit the ground too far before the ball. If I swing all arms and no body turn, I'm going to tend to swing more over the top and not have as much power. So we want to make sure that we're turning our body. We want to have the best of both worlds. So Jim L says, do you shallow the swing on a 30 to 50 yard? I think he means not years, 50 yard wet shot. Yes, absolutely. We wouldn't want to come down steep and over the top on those shots. Now, what I will say is if 30 yards is probably a little bit outside of the range that you would really hit kind of like a cut spin kind of shot. There are like specialty pitch kind of shots where you do come down steeply and kind of cut across the ball to try to create more spin. That's typically not going to be from outside of 30 yards, though. That's more of because the reason for that is that you can typically get enough height and spin on a 30-yard shot because you can hit it with enough speed to do so. But, if you need a lot of spin and, if you need a lot of spin, you need the ball to stop on a short shot. You can get more spin by cutting across the ball, by coming down steeply, right? Coming down steeply and cutting across it. right? That's something that you can do. But generally speaking, from the kind of yardage that you're talking about, yes, you would be wanting to shallow out the club, swing it from the inside and down. Now, is there going to need? So I think the reason why you might be asking this is that you feel like you actually have to do something to shallow out the club. Some people, yes, but a lot of times we don't, because when we bring the club back here, it's already in a shallow position because you can see how it's inside my hands. So if I were to hit a 30-yard shot, let's say I was hitting a wedge. Let's say I had a 56-degree wedge. If I was hitting a 30-yard shot, I'd probably bring it back to about right here, right? Well, this club's in a shallow position, right? Now, if I brought it to here, well, then, yeah, I would need to do something to shallow it out and bring it to here. But if I bring it to here, it's already shallow, and I can just bring it back through. So you don't need to actually do like a move to shallow it if it's already in a shallow position, which typically it's going to be. But if you're someone who's bringing the club back steeply, right, then you are going to need to do something to get it back here if you want to be more consistent, because hitting 30-yard and 50-yard shots where you're really cutting across it, it's not going to be very consistent. That's a good specialty shot that you can use from close around the green to get some spin, but that's a skill that needs to be learned through a lot of practice. All right, let's keep going. So A. Graziasi, I apologize if I'm mispronouncing. That says, I'm 66 years old, very good shape and reasonably good flexibility. Swing speed with the driver is 93 miles per hour. I debate this question with myself all the time. Should I lift my left heel in the backswing to gain swing speed and lengthen my backswing? It feels natural and comfortable, but I do seem to lose some control of the driver when I do so. Please advise. So basically, yes, if you want to free up your rotation, yes, you do want to lift that up. What I will say is that you want to make sure that whatever is making you get way out of control, that's what I would look at. So if I had to guess, you're probably lifting the heel off the ground, but you're losing your spine angle. If I had to guess, you're probably going like this, right? And if you're going like this, that can lead to a lot of inconsistencies. But if we're lifting the heel to turn our hips, right, and to turn more, right, I'm getting here. Now I'm in a good position with the heel coming off the ground. Then that's not going to make you. You're really just taking the same swing and you're just making it a little bit longer, right? But if you're making it longer by losing your spine angle, that's not what you want to do. So I would look on video. What I would recommend doing is actually compare the two swings. Look on video, use your phone, compare the swings on video, see what the more in control, keeping the heel on the ground swing looks like versus the swing that's where the heel's coming off the ground and is out of control. I would guess that you're probably leaning the spine angle toward the target, which then you have to make compensations in the downswing to try to get in a good place. It makes it more difficult to be in control of what you're doing. So that's what I would recommend doing. Hard for me to say without seeing your swing, but that's what I'd recommend doing. With that being said, looking at your swing, that is something that I do. So if you wanted to work with me and want me to look at your swing and let you know what's going on, I do actually have some swing review spots open. I opened up some today. There is an email going out tonight, so to let people know. So if you want to sign up for my swing reviews, just click the link at the top of the page there, and you can sign up. And we can get to work on your swing, whatever you want to do. If you have any questions about the swing reviews, I'd be happy to answer any of them on here. And we can talk about whatever you want to talk about for the swing reviews. But yeah, I highly recommend it. Good way to improve. And if it's winter where you are, it's actually a great great time to work on things. If you have the ability to, even if some people like to shut down for the season, which is fine. But if you're looking to get better and to come back next season even better, then I recommend actually practicing when everyone else isn't. And if you have the ability to be able to practice some indoors or do anything indoors, I'd highly recommend doing that. All right, so let's keep going here. So Steve B says, we hit off of mats at the range at my club during the winter. The mats are good quality and have an adjustable tee. A friend hits all of his shots off the tee, regardless of the club, to reduce potential injury. I'm thinking of doing the same. Are there any issues if you are hitting a wedge or iron off the tee instead of the mat as far as quality of practice? Well, yeah, you're not. You're basically the problem. So, what does it take to hit a good golf shot? Right? It takes ball first contact, center face contact, face and path direction. So, what would you be losing with hitting it off a tee? Well, you're losing the ground contact. Well, I mean, if that's your goal to do so, then yeah. What I would say is that if you are hitting off of mats and you're worried about getting injured, then you are swinging too steeply into the mat. We don't. If you're coming down and hitting down into the mat so much, yeah, sure, you're probably going to get some golfer's elbow or something like that over time. But that's more of a technique issue. We don't really want to be chopping down into the mat. If you're coming down and you're basically brushing the mat like you should be, getting a nice brushing of the mat, then there's not going to be any issues with that. So you may be coming down steeply into the mat if that's the case. So I would work on coming in more shallow with the mat, having a nice brushing with the mat. If you do that, it's not going to be any more injury prone than just hitting it off of the ground. But yeah, you're going to be losing some of that. If you're hitting off a tee, you can hit behind the golf ball. You can have the club bottom out behind the golf ball and still hit a good shot, right? So, it's definitely better than not doing any practice at all. But what I would say is a step up from doing that would be to hit directly off of the mat, and then work on getting to where you're not going to be injured hitting off of the mat by coming in nice and shallow. That's what I would recommend doing. But in the beginning stages, you may want to hit a tee. If you are someone who's really struggling with with your technique to come in nice and shallow with the mat, then hitting it off the tee would be maybe something be good to do. Do a small amount where you're working on coming in shallow, and then when you start getting better at coming in shallow, you can work toward hitting most of your shots, other than like your driver and stuff like that off the tee. All right, let's keep going. So Michael G says the right shoulder move to stop hitting bad iron shots helped me a lot today. Thank you. Please demonstrate how I get my right elbow tucked with speed on full speed, or full swing, excuse me. I get the half swing, but need a plan to get into that tucked position. So it's hard for me to know exactly what you need to do without seeing your swing to see exactly what's going on there. But I'd make sure that you have a good arm structure at the top of the swing. Unless you have just a really long swing, you don't want to have your elbow really flared out, because if you don't have a long swing like a Freddie Couples or a John Daly, Bubba Watson, like those players, you're not really going to have time to get it in position, right? So if you're right here and you're like this, you don't have any way of getting that to be in a good position. It's going to be very, very difficult. Whereas if you're like a Freddie Couples, who's way up here, right? He's way, way up here. He has time to get that in position. So that'd be the first thing I'd say. And the reason why I mention that is because most people don't have a really long swing. Most people have, what I consider like a fairly normal length swing or short swing. So yeah, that'd be the first thing. Make sure that your arm is in a good position there, so that way you can move it into a good position, right? The next thing I would say is I'd make sure that you have some left side bend at the top of the swing. If you're at the top of the swing and you're into what's called right side bend, so if we're talking about side bend, this would be left side bend, this would be right side bend. So for a right-handed golfer, if you have right side bend, meaning you're kind of crunching into your right side, you imagine my spine's curving like this, right? If we're like that, then it's going to be hard to move. If that elbow is not in a good position to begin with, it's going to be hard to move it into a good position, right? So I'd make sure that you have some left side bend, so that way you can move into right side bend and get the elbow in front. So that would be one piece. Another piece that I would look at So what did we mention so far? Have a good arm structure at the top. So like I said, I would have the elbow more underneath. For most people, this is going to be a pretty good position, having the elbow more underneath. If we have a shorter swing that's flared out, it's going to be very, very difficult. And then the next piece I would say, is the left side bend and the right side bend. And then beyond that, it's basically not letting your trail arm, win the arm wrestling contest in the start of the downswing, right? So we don't want to be going like this in the start of the downswing. We actually want to either kind of keep, if it's in a good position, then we want to keep it there, or we actually want to move into what's called external rotation in the shoulder. So that's losing an arm wrestling contest, right? So a good way to work on that would be this ball between the elbows drill. I really like that. So this is just a toy ball that I got from Target, I think. Ball between the elbows, just like that, right at the elbows. And you probably have something like this laying around at the house. Youth soccer ball, volleyball work fine. I like this one because it's just a squishy ball, and it's just a few dollars. There are training aids out there that cost money. That costs quite a bit more money. Has a lanyard that hangs from it. Those also exist, but maybe a little bit more convenient because when it falls, it just hangs from your neck versus falling to the ground. But quite a bit more expensive, 10 times more expensive. So yeah, ball between the elbows, go up to the top, stays between the elbows in the downswing, and then in your follow through, it can come out. So that would be a drill that you can do. Another one is to take your trail arm. I like that one probably the best because you can actually swing and hit balls with it. Another one you can do is you can take your lead arm or your lead wrist, bend it back like this, put it back behind your elbow, and then you can just make some swings where it's basically putting you in the right position. There's also other training aids out there where it's like this belt that goes around your torso here. It's got a box on the side. You can work on going up the top, getting the elbow in front of that box and the downswing, giving you instant feedback. So really what I would recommend doing is start out with, if you're wanting to go in full swing, go to the top of the swing, do a pause at the top, then make sure you're in good positions. Like make sure you're in a position at the top that will actually allow you to move your elbow into a good position. And then if you are, then I would go nice and slow and deliberate. And I just do lots of reps doing that. Look at yourself in the mirror, look at yourself on video, and work on it every night. It's usually not, if it's something that you're really struggling with, it's usually not something that you're going to be able to just go to the range, think about it, and it's going to happen. Usually just doesn't work that way. Unfortunately, I wish it was that way, but it just usually doesn't work that way. It's usually something you have to work on it every day. Look at yourself in the mirror, make sure you use feedback, make sure you have feedback for every single rep that you're doing, and not just feel like you're doing it, hope you're doing it, and do a lot of reps, because odds are you're not actually doing what you think you're doing, and you just wasted a lot of time doing reps when it didn't do you any good. So make sure that you're looking at yourself doing it. It might take a few seconds longer, but honestly, I'd much rather somebody do 10 reps of doing it right and correctly and getting something out of it than someone doing 100 reps in the same amount of time, but doing it the wrong way over and over and over, because you're just not going to get anything out of that. So you're just wasting your time if you're doing that. So make sure that you're using feedback and you're seeing what you're doing. Pause at the top, make sure you're in the good positions, and then work toward taking out the pause, looking at yourself, making sure you're in the good positions, and so on and so forth. And if you want to work with me and have a plan to work, on doing that, then let's do the swing reviews, and then I can actually point out exactly what you need to do specifically to get that working. All right, let's keep going. So Joe B says, at a recent charity golf tournament, I won a 30-minute simulator session, at Golf Galaxy. How would you recommend I use this 30-minute simulator session? Should I determine the average dispersion in yards of my driver versus 3-wood? Hit 20 shots with each club? Sure. I mean, if you want to. I don't know what should I get the average distance for my 3 wedges at 10 shots, full swings. 3 other recommendations for using a 30-minute. So if I want a 30-minute simulator range session, I would just go have fun. I mean, that's what I would do. That would be my recommendation. Um, but I mean, all of those things are things that you can do. I mean, if your fairways hit are 67%, like that's PGA Tour level, so that's not a problem. Um, Greens and regulation 32%. Yeah, so that can certainly be better. So I would probably work. You know, I would look at what's the so let's say your goal is to use this 30-minute simulator session to get better. It seems like you kind of already know what the um, issues are, right? So if I'm looking at your stats, right, you're saying you're 11.6 handicap, your greens and regulation, your fairways hit are 67%. So, like I said, that is not an issue. That if you're hitting 67% of fairways, you're doing really well. I mean, that's the PGA Tour average is something like, um, 63% or something like that. It's around that. If you're anywhere in the 60% of fairways hit, you're doing pretty good. And then your greens regulation should, if you want to lower your handicap, that's probably where you need to look at. If you're hitting a lot of shots short, then I would investigate why so many of your shots are short. If 35% of them are short, then that's kind of what I would be investigating. Typically, when people are hitting it short, it's either because they're just not using enough club. So one thing you may want to do is just aim for the back of the green and see if that improves. You could hit a lot of your iron shots and just see like where hit change irons every time and just try to hit the different targets. They may have a mode. I don't know what they have there, but I know a lot of simulators have a mode where it tells you to hit like a different shot every single time. So what I would do is I would just see what happens, maybe see what happens if you hit what you would normally hit right now, but then just take a club extra and see if you improve your greens regulation. Now you will probably hit more long, but you might go from 8% long to 50% long, but then only leave like 5 or 10% short. Well, overall, you're going to hit way more greens doing that. So that'd be something to look at, and I would investigate why you're hitting it. Excuse me, why you're hitting it short. So is it because you're not using enough club? Is it because you're a little you're a little bit off with your yardages, meaning you think that you hit your clubs a little bit longer than what you actually do? Is it because you mishit shots? So hit them off the heel, hit them off the toe, thin chunk. What's going on there? So that's what I would investigate: is what exactly is leading to those misses, and that's what I would work on. But you don't need a 30-minute simulator session to do that. You can do that anywhere. So yeah, that's what I'd recommend doing. So Ken C says, how would you best recommend determining, measuring your shot pattern? Track it, while you're playing. That's what I'd recommend doing. So sounds like, that's kind of what Joe has done. So I just track it while you're playing. So, there are things out there that do that for you. So Arcos Golf does it. I think there's several other ones out there, but there's technology out there that kind of helps you do it on your own. But honestly, you can just do it the old fashioned way and just basically note on every single hole. And I can tell you what, you play 5 rounds and you note every single hole, what happened. Basically, you're going to see trends and you're going to see patterns, what the issues are. So you can see in Joe's question, he kind of already did that. He knows that he's missing 32% of fairways, and a third of those, are short, right? Or a third of his, shots into the green are short. So, for him, I would look at, well, what happened? I would make another note. Okay, it was short, but why was it short? Was it short? Did I hit it solid and I just misplayed it? Did I misjudge the wind? Right? Maybe I hit it solid and I thought it was the right play, but gust of wind came up and let's rub the green or whatever. or I hit it off the toe, I hit it off the heel, I chunked it. What actually made it short, right? That's what I'd be looking at, and just make a note of it on every shot. That's what I'd recommend doing. It takes a little bit extra time, but then you really learn about your game and what's necessary, and what you need to do to improve. So if you do that, you'll actually figure out what the number one thing is where you're losing the most strokes. And that's generally how I like to teach. I like to have people, in my online lessons, we want to identify what is the number one issue that's costing them the most strokes. And then from there, what we're going to do is we're going to improve on that issue every month until we basically make that weakness a strength. And then once we do, then we just move on to whatever the next thing was, right? So let's say, in Joe's case, let's say that it's chunking, let's say that he's leaving a lot of, obviously if you look at his fairways hit, really good. I mean, that's basically his fairways hit. That's at scratch golf stats. Now that's the percentage. I don't know how far he's hitting it. If he's hitting it a decent distance, then that he's a basically scratch golfer off the tee, right? But then from the fairway, he's hitting 32%. So that's maybe like I don't know what 32%. That's probably pretty decent. Putting may actually be the issue. I mean, 32% greens there. It doesn't sound like a lot, but I'm trying to remember what it is what greens and regulations are per like handicap window. But I would say you're probably not crazy below where you need to be. But if you're hitting 67% of fairways, I would hope you would hit a little bit more greens in regulation than that. But let's say that he looks at it and it's chunking, right? Well, then we're just going to work on making better ground contact. And then doing that's going to make those short numbers go down. Then his greens in regulation number is going to go up, right? So if we make the short number go down to like, 15%, and then now his greens in regulation is going to go up 20%. Now he's hitting 50% of the greens in regulation, and now he has way more birdie. So he's just cutting a ton of strokes off his game just doing that. So yeah, that's what I would look at. And obviously, probably down the line, it's going to improve other things. You put up and downs are 28%. Well, if you're hitting it, I imagine that a lot of the greens that he's missing are putting himself in positions where it's difficult to get up and down. Well, if we improve, if he improves, getting it closer to the green, then his up and downs are probably going to go higher as well, because he's putting himself in a position to be able to get up and down more easily, because his misses, even the ones that he misses, are probably not going to be as far off. So yeah, that's what I do. I just take notes on your hole, on the hole. What happened on your tee shot? What did you hit? What happened? Did it go to the right? Was it a slice? What happened? And then, was it fairway? Was it not? And then on your approach shot, where are you hitting from? The rough? How far are you? What club did you hit? Did you hit it on the green? Did you hit it solid? Did you hit it way off the toe and still hit it on the green? Or, I just take a note for what happened on every shot. And then you actually start to understand why you're struggling, for sure. All right, so let's get going. So Carl C says, I've been working on the 20-minute shallow fix. It's going well. With my driver, I noticed most of my shots are near the hosel, some in center, but mostly center hosel area. Suggestions. Yeah, so that can happen sometimes. So the reason for that is if you're someone who's going from a steep swing to now a shallow swing, oftentimes we can start getting strikes in the heel. And the reason for this is that when we come down steep and over the top, the sweet spot will tend to work toward us, right? And that's going to tend to make shots go off the toe. Well, then you essentially adapt to that, and you start to get shots that are in the center of the face when you're coming down steep, right? Well, when we now change that to coming down shallow, and we have the sweet spot working more away from us, well, now that's going to bring the hosel more into play. So basically, you just need to adapt readapt with coming down shallow to getting that strike more in the center of the face, just like you did before. You may have done it without realizing it, but that's more than likely what happened before. So the way to do that is we just have to adjust our feel to get the desired result that we want, right? Now, there could be something that's happening. So first of all, what I'd recommend that you're doing is that you're not shallowing out the club by pushing the hips toward the golf ball, because if that's what you're doing to shallow out the club, then that can definitely cause the hosel strikes. So I'd first make sure that you're not shallowing out the club by going like this, right? If I go like that, then that's pushing my body out toward the golf ball, and it's making it. I'm not going to have enough room for my hands to work through. So that's what I would look at first. If that's what's going on, then we want to make sure that we're shallowing out the club with our upper body, and then the hips are kind of pushing back. So I would just try to feel like you're pushing those hips back and out of the way and creating space for your arms, and then swinging way out to the right when you do that, if that is the case. Now, if you're already doing that and you're still hitting it off the hosel, then or near the heel of the club, then what I would recommend doing is, change your intention. Change your intention to hitting it off the toe. And even when you're working on, let's say you are really extending like this, if you're still hitting off the hosel, you may still need to hit it off the toe. But I would try to hit the ball off of the toe. Right now you're hitting off the hosel, you're trying to hit in the center. So try to hit off the toe to get the strike in the center. And you got to keep doing that until you actually start hitting it off the toe consistently. And then at that point, you can essentially, ease off of the feeling a little bit. You start getting the strike in the toe. So just to recap, the reasons why is because you're used to the sweet spot working toward you. Now it's working away from you. Tends to make heel strikes. Sometimes what people will do, they push their hips forward to get the club to shallow out. Make sure that you're not doing that. Push the hips back, swing to the right. If you're still hitting it off the toe when you do that, or let's say you're not pushing your hips back, you're not pushing the hips forward, then I would just try to hit the ball off the toe, and you just keep doing that until you actually start hitting it off the toe. And at that point, you're essentially calibrated. And you can go back to hitting it in the center of the face. So Ken C says, what's your opinion on decade and golf metrics? And circles as well. So I'm not familiar with golf metrics or circles, but we know the decade guys. Clay's actually talked with Lou Stagner, who's he works with Decade. I think he's talked with Sean Foss as well. I haven't had the chance to talk with him, but all really super knowledgeable guys. Everything just totally makes sense. I like that stuff. I'm kind of a, golf, analytics nerd. So I like that stuff. I think it's great. Like I said, I'm not sure about the golf metrics stuff. I don't know if that's a brand or if you're just talking about golf, golf analytics metrics or whatever. But yeah, Decade's really, really good. Highly recommend it for sure. So let's keep going. Carl C says, related to the 20-minute shallowing fix, taking a very strong grip, slightly bowing the lead wrist. Please discuss the rolling of the arms after the ball. Well, it really just depends on the release pattern that's necessary to square up the face, right? It depends on how much shaft lean you have. There's a lot of things that are going on here. So generally speaking, the stronger your grip is, the less strong your wrist angles need to be, and the more you need to kind of hold the face instead of rolling over the face, right? So let's say I have a strong grip, right? Well, if I were to have a strong grip and bow my wrist and roll my hands over, even if I have a ton of shaft lean, look at the club face, right? That's super closed, right? So that's why we recommend a strong grip, because those wrist angles are typically difficult for a lot of people to do. So generally it's easier to have a strong grip and kind of feel like you're holding the face the whole time. Or what you can do is you can have a neutral too strong grip and have some roll in the wrist at impact. You can have a weak grip, but if you have a weak grip, you're going to need to introduce some really strong wrist angles to make that happen. Now, the benefit of the wrist angles is that the strong wrist angles do two things. And that's why you see a lot of tour players do it. That it closes the face and it also shallows out the club, right? So if I go like this, you can see how that shallows out the club and it also closes the face, right? So if I'm here, that is going to close the face and shallow out the club. So it's doing two things that I want to do, right? So that's why you see a lot of tour players doing it, but you don't need to, if you want to shallow, there's lots of things that can shallow out the club, right? We can shallow out the club with our arms. We can shallow out the club, with our shoulder joints, with our forearms. We can shallow out the club in a lot of ways. So generally, what we found the easier way for most people to shallow out the club is to have a strong grip and to really feel like we're leading with the elbows and the downswing. If we have that feeling there, that usually shallows out the club, puts you in a really strong position. So that's why we recommend doing that. And that's what we found works the best. And we've seen really, really great results with it. So it's just a matter of, there's lots of ways to get this club face to the golf ball. It's just a matter of matching up the things that work best for you. So like, if you look at a Roy McIlroy has a pretty neutral grip. He rolls his hands through impact, so he kind of rolls the face down through impact. If you look at a Tiger, he does something very similar. If you look at Colin Morikawa, he has a very weak grip, and he bows the wrist at the top and then kind of rolls that down into impact. If you look at like a Brooks Koepka, he has a strong, or no, I think it's fairly neutral, his grip. He bows the wrist and then he holds it through impact. Dustin Johnson, same kind of thing. Bows the wrist, holds it through impact. So there's lots of ways to do it. You just have to find what works best for you. Generally what we found, like I said, is stronger grip, pretty neutral wrist angles at the top. If you have a strong enough grip, you can actually have some cupping at the top, but we can't continue to cup it when we're coming down. That's going to lead to opening of the face and putting you in a poor position. So if you have a stronger grip, you can get away with some cup in the wrist, and you can get away with that coming down to the golf ball as well. So wrist angles are generally the most difficult for people to do. So stronger grip definitely makes that easier. All right, let's keep going. So Jim W says, I'm 74 and have trouble gripping the club. I have calluses on my index fingers between the hand and the first knuckle, especially with trail hand. Should I be looking at fatter grips? Well, first I'd make sure that you're wearing a glove. May want to consider 2 gloves if your hands are really getting sensitive. Fatter grips, maybe. I mean, it's hard to say. If you have really large hands, I would just, as far as grip size is concerned, I would just use what's most comfortable to you. If fatter grips are more comfortable to you, then that's what I would use. If you have large hands, then small grips may not feel very secure. I get probably average size hands, and standard grip, mid-size grip, they all feel pretty good to me. I've tried using I tested out a jumbo grip, and I felt like I couldn't really hold on to it. I mean, I felt like a Coke can, like it was just huge. So for me, and I tested the biggest one that they had. Maybe their smallest jumbo may be a little bit more reasonable. But the one that I used, I mean, it was like a baseball bat. It just felt to me like it wasn't very secure. So, I didn't swing as fast with that. I actually swung slower with that. So that's kind of what I would be looking at, just whatever's most comfortable for you. I don't know that using a fatter grip is going to make any difference to your calluses. I would say the main thing, if you're having like painful calluses on your hands, I would say the main thing is, use gloves. Use a good quality glove, because that's going to help. That's what gloves are for, right? To help you to, and maybe consider taping your fingers, like athletic tape, may help things as well. So Carl C says, related to the shallow swing, I've improved thinking chopping the log. My swing is now at the top end of the shallow cone, but not in the center or lower. Suggestions? Yeah, I would put the obstacle on the ground. I would basically do the plan A and plan B drills from the 20-minute shot fix without seeing your swing. I just don't know what's going on. So the only thing I can really tell you is to do the plan A and plan B for the for the for the drill number 2. So plan A is to put an obstacle on the ground, right? So obstacle on the ground there, and coming down and swinging to avoid that. If you do that, you'll automatically be in the cone as long as you're putting it in a place. So this is a box, from some golf balls. I just set it right there, put it, a little bit to the inside of the ball, a little bit behind the ball. And some people, say it's in the way. So if it is, just start with it already behind it, right? And then make swings where you come down, you avoid hitting that, right? Avoid hitting that, and then you'll automatically be in the cone. If you come down, you want to avoid it. Now, if you have trouble with that, then I'd recommend the wall drill. That's where you set up with your heels. I think Clay says 1.5 feet or a foot behind a wall, and you're going to go up to the top, and you're going to keep the club on the wall as long as you can. Then you swing from the inside. You can see when I do that how much under the cone it gets. So you got to really exaggerate it. So that's what I would recommend doing. If I could see your swing, then I could tell you specifically like the body parts and motions and stuff that you need to focus on, what's out of whack. Because basically, so here's what it comes down to. To shallow the club, we want to use our upper body. We want to make sure that we're not using the lower body to shallow out the club. The lower body is used to rotate the body. The upper body is used to shallow out the club. So a lot of people shallow out the club with the lower body, with the legs. So what that would be, one would be a hip bump, right? So if I'm like this and I bump my hips forward, you can see how that shallows out the club. And a lot of people will also extend the hips. So if I'm here and then I extend the hips, that shallows out the club. A lot of people do both at the same time. So they bump the hips forward and they extend the hips forward, right? So those two things, straightening out the legs, right? So if I'm here and then I straighten out the legs, that straightens out my upper body. So basically all those things shallow out the club. But that's not what we want to do, right? We want to rotate with the lower body. If I straighten out, if I extend, if I do all those things very early in the start of the downswing when I need to shallow out the club, then I'm not going to be able to rotate. If I go like this, I can't rotate my body. I need to actually flex my legs and push my leg and then extend up and through to finish the rotation of my lower body. What I want to do is I want to shallow out the club with the upper body. So that starts, there's several things that we can do. So it starts in our wrists. We can do this. So that's the bowing of the lead wrist, extending of the trail wrist. That shallows out the club. We can also turn the doorknob. So that's in my forearms. So if I keep my elbows to my side and I rotate my forearms, that shallows out the club, right? And then with my shoulder joints, I can shallow out the club. So that's turning my elbows, because that's what Clay talks about. It's the chopping motion, right? So that also shallows out the club. So that's external rotation in my trail shoulder and internal rotation, which would be that way, internal rotation. So that's basically getting those elbows to point out toward the golf ball and toward the target, right? If I move my elbow back behind me, that's internal rotation in my trail shoulder, right? That's going to steepen the club, right? So we don't want to do that. That can be making the club go above the cone. So that would be that. And then the last piece is some right side bend. So within our spine, we can, or trail, I should say trail side bend for the left-handed golfers. So for a left-hander, it'd be left side bend, right-handed golfer would be right side bend. So if I'm at the top, so if you want to imagine like my spine curving, I'm going like this, right? That's also shallowing out the club. So if I do all of those things, I bow my wrists, I rotate my forearms, I get my elbows, I in my shoulder joints here, I get my elbows pointing out, and I also put in right side bend as I'm starting down. Look at how much I can shallow out that club. I mean, I can get that club parallel to the ground. And then if I were to early extend my hips, right? I mean, look how shallow I can get the club way down here, right? But I don't want to do that. I want to get my body rotating, right? So all of those things can shallow out the club. You just have to pick out the thing. I don't know which one's off for you. So those would be the things I'd be looking at. So Greg A says, for the group, I have Q as my coach for the unlimited swing reviews. Oh, hey, Greg. Yeah. Yeah, Greg works with me. 100% worth the investment for personalized feedback. Highly recommend. Has made a huge impact to my confidence and mechanics. A long way to go, but process is there. Awesome. Thanks, Greg. Great. Thanks for the feedback, buddy. Yeah. So Greg does my lessons with me. Been working with him for a couple months now. Making some progress for sure. Appreciate that, Greg. So Larry L says, Q, a couple weeks ago, you posted a video, always be closing. Can you please go over the club face positions for each part of the swing? Thanks. So basically, when I say ABC, always be closing. So what we want to understand is that a lot of what we do in our downswing is a reaction to the club face, right? So if the club face is open, we're going to do things that help that accommodate that. So there's several things that golfers do that we don't want to do to be consistent that help close the face. So one would be coming down steep, right? So if my face is open when I'm coming down, if my face is open, then what's going to happen is I'm going to tend to come over the top to compensate for that. Because if I were to shallow out the club with an open club face, I would, if I even hit the ball, because you can imagine it. So open club face, and then I swing from the inside. Look at what's going to the golf club. My hosel is. So if I were even to hit the golf ball, that's pretty extreme. But let's say the face isn't quite that open, but I'm still, shallowing it out. Well, if my face is open and I'm shallowing it out, if I make good contact, I'm just going to hit so far. It's going to start to the right and it's going to slice even more to the right. And, our brain says, I don't want to hit the ball that way. I want to hit it that way. So what do? Open face. We'll swing way to the left. So that way we can try to get the ball to go somewhat toward the target. So that's one thing that happens. Let's say that you have the face somewhat open, but then you are kind of bringing this club from the inside. Well, if you were to keep rotating, you get your hands in front, well, the face would just stay open. You just hit it a mile to the right. So what we do is we will flip the face to square it up, right? So imagine this. If I'm here, I have this face open, and I rotate, and I come into impact with my hands in front, the face is just going to stay open, right? Or what I can do, I can have this face open, and then I can stall my body, flip my hands, and now the face is square. But we don't want to come into contact like this, right? We want to come into contact like that with the hands in front. So that's why I say always be closing, because it's an exaggeration. We don't technically, in the grand scheme of things, we don't want to have the face way too close, because then we'll just hit everything left. But for people that are having the face too open to begin with, I think it's good to explore all the things that we can do to get the club face closed. And then we can always tone those pieces down if we need to. So that's kind of the idea behind the always be closing. So what I mean is when we bring the club back, I would feel like that club face is pointing toward the ground, right? So what would I need to do that? I'd have a strong grip. So I'd have my hands strong on the grip. And then I would also kind of bow my lead wrist, and extend back my trail wrist when I'm bringing it back to make that happen. And at the top of the swing, I try to feel that same thing. I try to feel like the back of my lead hands pointing up to the sky and my palm of my trail hands pointing up the sky. So that would be super closed, right? And then when I'm coming down, I want to feel like that club face is pointing down toward the ground. And now I'm incentivized to swing this club from the inside, to shallow it out. And I'm incentivized to get my hands in front, because if I were to do the same things, if I were to have the face really closed and come way over the top and flip the club, well, I might hit myself in the shin, with the golf ball. I'm going to hit it way left and left. So your body, your GPS system says you don't want to do that. So what you'll do is you'll shallow out the club more. You'll get the hands more in front to help you to hit it more toward the target. So that's kind of the idea behind that drill. Now, as far as general checkpoints of where you would kind of want to be with the club face in the swing. So I club first parallel in the swing. What I like to see is that club face matching the back line. Now, does it have to be like that? No, it doesn't. It really depends on other things that are going on in your swing. What I would say is if your face is like this when you're bringing it back and you're struggling to get the club face square to get it closed, then you're probably going to benefit from having it here. Now, if you're bringing it back like this and you're bringing the club face in too close, then you may benefit from having it a little bit more toe up. It really depends on the player, but a general good guideline doesn't have to always be like this, especially in the backswing, because we're so far away from hitting the golf ball that we can recover from this very, pretty easily, right? If this is off, a lot of players do. There's a lot of players that have this Victor Hovland has this club like this when he's coming back, right? So obviously he's one of the best ball strikers in the world and he does that. So it's not like you can't hit great golf shots from having a very shut face. A lot of players do. So I wouldn't worry about that unless you're just coming in with the face very closed at impact. What's the most important thing is how the club's being delivered to the ball, right? So here, club face, kind of matching the back line. If you're not familiar, the back line would be kind of this. If you're looking at kind of the angle of my back, so that'd be a very vertical back line. That'd be more, horizontal back line. But if we're generally in normal posture, right, that's matching my back line. At the top of the swing, a good checkpoint is to see the club face a little bit close to my forearm, right? So here would be my forearm. You can see that club face is pointing a little bit more toward the ceiling. So this would be open to my forearm. You can see how I cup my wrist to do that. And this would be very close to my forearm, right? So you can see the club face is kind of pointing off that way. My forearm's like this. And then coming down, again, club parallel in the downswing. This is, I like to see the club face matching the back line, right? And it doesn't mean that you have to be like this. It just means that, let's say that you have the face like this and you really struggle with getting the club face closed and you flip the face to make that happen. Well, getting the club face to match that more easily. This is actually something that me and Greg are working on in his swing. He's kind of coming in with the face open, right, like this, and he struggles a little bit with his consistency of his shots, but he's getting it to be more like this, and now things are getting more consistent, right? Because from here, I don't have to flip it so much to square it up. I can continue to turn my body and have that face square. I'm incentivized to move my body in the correct way in the downswing. So those are basically the position. And then obviously at impact, we want to have a fairly square face toward the target, right? But we want to do that with shaft lean. We want to do that with a correct arc down to the golf ball, right? Meaning we don't want to do that while coming down steep or way too much from the inside. We want to have a nice, slightly from the inside arc to the golf ball. So that's basically the club face, but always be closing exaggerates those things because I just see so many golfers struggle with a very open face and, exaggerating. I think too many players just try to ease into things too much. They're just trying to do it a little bit. And I understand why, because it's uncomfortable to do something that's way off from what you normally do. Right. But to really move the needle and get results really fast, we gotta jump in and we gotta exaggerate things because you can always tone down things. So that's what I'd recommend doing. Embrace being out of your comfort zone a little bit because it's going to help you to make progress faster. Shut the face down, and then if it gets too shut, you can always ease off of it. But at least you're going to figure out what things are easy, what things are easier for you to get the club face shut. Is it a strong grip? Is it stronger wrist angles? Whatever one's easier for you to do, stick with that one. To help get the club face close enough to get the mechanics that you want. All right, let's keep going. 6 o'clock right now, but I'll answer the rest of the questions here. So Ken C says, Golf Metrics is Mark Brody's app that tracks strokes gained golf. Yeah, I haven't used that. So I don't have any opinion on it, but yeah, Mark Brody's the one he came up with the strokes gained stuff. I've read his book. It's good stuff. Yeah, if you're interested in that book, I actually have it right here. Every Shot Counts. This one right here, this is the one by Mark Brody. He came up with the strokes gain, a lot of the golf analytics that they use on the PGA Tour. Really interesting book. I liked it a lot. If you like math and stuff like that, I'd recommend it for sure. All right, let's keep going. So Stephen M says, what is the difference between hitting a hybrid versus an iron? Do you need to come in a lot more shallow with the hybrid, or do you do that by shallowing the club alone? Should the head be behind the ball? So the short answer to your question is hitting a hybrid is exactly like hitting an iron. Don't do anything different. I'd hit your hybrid the exact same way that you hit your iron. Now, if you're trying to hit your hybrid higher, then you may play it a little bit more forward and try to get a little bit more behind the ball to kind of hoist it up. But if you're just trying to hit it solid, normal trajectory kind of shot, just hit it the exact same way that you would a 7-iron. There's no difference. You're still shallowing out the club the same way. You're still, if you're trying to hit it higher, you're definitely going to be a little bit more behind it. If you're trying to hit it higher, I will say that if you try to do that, your tendency to maybe hit it thin or hit the ground a little bit before the ball may be a little bit higher. So it's a little bit more of a higher degree of difficulty kind of shot. You better have a good lie when you do that. But generally, I would just try to hit it just like you would an iron. That's what I'd recommend. So Dan A says, "Hey Q, how much of a divot should I be taking? I noticed that I was just brushing the turf during full swings. For some reason, I was shallowing the club naturally through gravity, I guess. Could I be too shallow when I'm just brushing the turf and not really taking a divot? Would that have a negative impact on distance? Thanks." So it's really a tough question because a lot of it depends on the conditions that you're playing in. So tighter, softer, wetter conditions are going to tend to be more conducive to divots. It also depends on the club that you're hitting. So if you're hitting a wedge, you're going to be way more likely to take a divot than you would a 3-wood, because a wedge has a sharp leading edge on it that's going to dig more into the turf, right? And typically you're going to be playing a wedge. The ball position is going to be more in the middle of your stance, whereas a 3-wood, you may push that out just a little bit forward, which would promote more of a shallower angle of attack into the golf ball. So there's no like concrete answer, like every divot you take should be like a dollar bill. I would say a dollar bill is kind of like a general, what I would say is kind of like a general, like if I had to put an answer to it, I only had one answer to take, I would say dollar bill. But if you're playing in very wet conditions, soft conditions, it's a very tight lie. You may take a lot. I mean, we've seen on the PGA Tour. I mean, these guys are flipping flapjacks up there, right? You've seen a lot of the huge divots that they take. Well, those are tight, soft, wet conditions oftentimes that they're playing in, and then you're usually seeing that with a wedge that's just going to dig into the turf. And a lot of times they will come down more steeply into the ball and take a bigger divot because they're trying to get more spin on the ball. So there's no concrete answer to it. What I would say is that if you're hitting the ball in the middle of the face, you're hitting it very solid. Whatever divot you're taking is fine, because sometimes you're going to have the ball, maybe it's sitting up on the grass like it's on a tee. You really don't need to take that much of a divot when you do that. You're just going to maybe brush some of the grass. So I would say if you're hitting a lot of thin shots, you're hitting it very low on the face quite often, then you probably need to get a little bit more downward on the ball to help you to get it more in the center of the face, and probably a little bit more shaft lean. But if you're hitting it really solid and you have a good amount of shaft lean and you're getting those brushed, those brushing of the grass shots when you're hitting it solid, you're getting those, then you're probably taking enough of a divot. If you're playing in very dry conditions where it's very hard and firm, the club's not going to dig into the ground as much, so you're not going to take much of a divot. So a lot of it depends on the conditions, a lot of it depends on the club, a lot of it depends on what you're trying to do. Are you trying to hit down to get more spin? What I'd say is if you're hitting it solid, then odds are your divot is just fine. All right, one more here. John S says, "How much do you recommend lifting the heel of the trail foot for consistent strikes?" There's no set amount. It's really what I would look at is what allows you to get the proper hip turn, right? So basically what I don't like thinking about necessarily, the way I would think about it is you're freeing up the heel. You're allowing the heel to come up off the ground, right? And your hips are pulling the heel off the ground. So I wouldn't try to feel like you have to keep your feet grounded, right? I would allow your feet or allow your hips to turn as much as they can, right? Comfortably. And however much your heel comes, I know I lift my heel a little bit off the ground. I have no idea how much. I know it comes off the ground, but I don't know if it's a half inch or I don't know if I'm even like this. I don't have any idea because I'm not focused on my heel coming off the ground. I'm just focused on getting as good a turn as I can. So there's no set amount. It's just a matter of how much can you get your hips to turn and let the heel freely come off the ground. So that way you have the freedom to rotate. If I were to push my heel onto the ground, I had to keep it on the ground. You see how much less I'm rotating? So here's me feeling very free and letting my heel come off the ground. I couldn't tell you how much it is off the ground. If I'm stopping here and thinking about it and not looking at it, I'm guessing it's 3 or 4 inches off the ground, right? It's actually 2 inches off the ground. It wasn't that much, right? But if I keep, so here's freedom of rotation, hip off the ground, past, this is probably like a 50, 60 degree turn, right? And then keeping it on the ground, that's maybe 40 degrees, right? So you just want to let your hips be free, let your hips pull the heel off the ground. What I see oftentimes is people are just thinking about bringing their heel off the ground, but they're not actually turning their hips anymore. So what they're doing is they're just going like this. Well, that doesn't really do anything, right? Turn your hips and then let your hips pull your heel off the ground. That's what you want to do. And however much it's off the ground, that's how much it is. There's no wrong or right amount. It's just a matter of getting the freedom of rotation to pull the hips off the ground. All right. Thanks everybody for joining me. We'll be back here tomorrow. And we'll also be here Wednesday, 11 a.m. And then Thursday, Friday, we are off for the holiday. Then I'll be back Monday, but we will have office hours tomorrow and Wednesday, 11 a.m. Talk to you soon.